The P-47 was one of the biggest, heaviest and most robust single-seater fighter aircraft of World War II. It was a big aircraft, and by big I mean huge. It was about 4 feet longer than the P-51 and 50% heavier. At 10,000 pounds, it weighed almost twice as much as a Spitfire. Though it wasn't a great turn fighter, it was fast, and its heavyweight construction and air-cooled Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine made it a great ground attack aircraft, as it could take huge amount of damage and still fly home. The roots of the P-47 are reaching back to the 1930s, when Alexander de Seversky, a Russian immigrant, started his own business, the Seversky Aircraft Corporation, in 1931. He gathered talented engineers, many of them expatriate Russians like himself. This included Alexander Kartveli, who will become the lead designer of the P-47 later. Their first aircraft was the SEV-3, and on this we can already notice the design philosophy that will lead to the P-47. The semi-elliptical wings, the oval bulky fuselage, and the search for high speed and performance. When the SEV-3 took off in 1933, it was one of the most advanced aircraft in the world. Then in 1939, the Seversky Aircraft Corporation presented their AP-4 model, which will become the P-43 Lancer, to the Army Air Corps. It was powered by a Pratt & Whitney R1830 radial engine and featured a belly-mounted supercharger. This competition was won by Curtiss with the XP-40 prototype, mainly because Curtiss had the capacity to start manufacturing right away. But the Air Corps liked the AP-4 as well, as with its supercharged engine, it proved to be an excellent high-altitude performer. The Seversky Aircraft Corporation was in financial trouble at that time, and the Air Corps ordered 13 of the AP-4 prototypes to help keep the company alive. Nonetheless, Seversky was voted out from the lead of his own company by the board, and the company was renamed Republic Aviation Corporation. Republic started working on a new lightweight fighter, which received its designation XP-47. This was very similar design to the Curtiss XP-46 prototype. By 1940, it was concluded that these designs were inferior to the German fighters, as the experiences in Europe showed that fast, high-altitude and more powerful fighters were needed, which had long-distance capabilities. Based on this, new specifications were issued by the Air Corps. Top speed at least 400 miles an hour at 25,000 feet. Armament at least 6 50 caliber machine guns. Armor plating around the pilot, and self-sealing fuel tanks with a minimum of 315 gallons fuel capacity. Alexander Kartveli, the designer at Republic, realized that the planned lightweight fighter's airframe will not be capable to fulfill the requirements. A new, much larger plane was designed, the XB-47B. This was the base for the P-47 fighters. This new prototype used the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, which produced 2000 horsepower. The plane received its distinctive oval-shaped fuselage because of the complicated belly-mounted supercharger. The first inspection on the prototype fighter found that the fuel capacity was somewhat less than the requirements and it was a bit overweight, but the final decision will come down to its performance. On May 6, 1941, the XB-47B made its first flight, which turned out to be quite an event. The plane worked as intended, and the test pilot, Lowery Brabham, was impressed with the handling. However, due to a small technical mistake, smoke started to fill the cabin. The pilot decided to land as fast as possible, but due to the wet and muddy runway at the airfield at Republic, he decided to put the plane down at the nearby Mitchellfield Air Base. He landed without any problems, but the arrival of a never-before-seen giant fighter plane caused quite a stir at the airfield. Later testing showed that the XB-47B was a good performer. It reached 412 miles an hour at 25,800 feet. Some minor problems were worked out before manufacturing began, and also the P-47s received an updated and lighter version of the same engine. The P-47 was a very strongly built aircraft. There were numerous documented cases where these aircraft were hit by flak, hit a tree, or had several cylinders of their engines shot off, but still made it back. Here's a compilation of some pictures of such combat damage examples. First Lieutenant John A. Dooling inspects a hole on his P-47 made by anti-aircraft fire. Second Lieutenant Justus D. Foster brought back his P-47 after hit by several 20mm shells. This P-47 made it back with its control surfaces shot up and the pilot injured. Flak hole on the tail of a Brazilian P-47. First Lieutenant Richard P. Sulzbach, while on a ground attack mission, flew too low and hit a few trees, but made it back. First Lieutenant Alva D. Hanahan showing an 88mm shell hole on his P-47. Now let's see the P-47's technical specifications. Armament: 8 wing-mounted 50 caliber machine guns, up to 2,500 pounds of bombs, up to 10 rockets. Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial air-cooled engine producing 2000 horsepower. Maximum speed 426 miles an hour at 30,000 feet. Effective range 1030 miles. Service ceiling 42,000 feet. P-47 variants. XP-47, the original lightweight interceptor design. XP-47B, the larger, heavier first version of the original P-47 design. P-47B, first production variants. 171 were built. P-47C, improved production variant. These received metal rudders instead of fabric-covered ones, better oxygen systems and radios. P-47D Razorback. These were similar to the P-47C models but built in the new Evansville plant. Altogether, more than 9,500 Razorbacks were built before switching to bubble canopy. P-47G. Republic couldn't keep up with the increasing orders for P-47s even with their second plant, so in 1942 Curtiss received a contract to build P-47s in their new Buffalo plant. These were the G models. XP-47H. In an attempt to further increase the performance of the aircraft, a project was started to install a Chrysler-made 16-cylinder 2,300 horsepower engine. This variant had an expected top speed of 490 miles an hour, but it had problems, and by the time they worked it out, the war was over. XP-47J. It was a similar project to the XP-47H, but with a completely new airframe and a 2,800 horsepower R2857C engine. This variant flew first on November 26, 1943. In 1944, it became the first piston aircraft to exceed the 500 miles an hour mark. XP-47K and L variants. This was a prototype version for the bubble canopy when a Hawker Typhoon canopy was fitted on a P-47D in July 1943. The L version also had increased fuel capacity. P-47D Bubble Top. This was the production variant of the bubble top design based on the XP-47L prototype. P-47M. By the end of the war, the appearance of jet fighters such as the Me-262 and Me-163 called for even higher speed fighters. Republic converted 4 P-47Ds to the new 2,800 horsepower engine with a new supercharger and a new type of propeller to increase speed. These improvements resulted in a new top speed of 473 miles an hour. P-47N. On the Pacific theater, the need for greater ranges for fighters was even higher than in Europe, so a new P-47 version with longer span wet wings were produced. The first P-47s were sent to England at the end of 1942 to join the 8th Air Force. Their first combat mission took place in March 1943. They started their service in Italy as well later this year. Altogether, P-47s flew 746,000 sorties and ended the war with 3,752 air-to-air kills. They lost 3,499 P-47s altogether in all types of missions. The P-47 was the US Army Air Force primary fighter bomber by the end of 1943. Combat service with other countries. The RAF received 240 Razorback P-47s and later 590 bubble top P-47Ds. They were named Thunderbolt, Mark I and Mark II by the British. They mainly used them for ground attack role, and later in the war they were used in Burma as well against the Japanese forces. During the Italian campaign, the 1st Brazilian Fighter Squadron used P-47Ds as well. The French Air Force received 446 P-47D aircraft from 1933. They remained in service after World War II and see action in the Algerian War of Independence as well. The Soviet Union received more than 200 P-47Ds in the Lend-Lease program. At least one P-47 was captured and used by the German Luftwaffe. This was found at the end of the war in a hangar with German markings. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.